Welcome to How to Read with a Purpose, Literary Analysis. It's our first presentation of this week. Let's get going. When we talk about literary theory, we need to understand that it's a lens we use to analyze what we're reading. It's a way of looking at the world, and it provides rules and assumptions to work with as you examine the world being what you are reading. Authors have a very specific way of writing that they want to tell their story, and by using literary theory, you get more out of reading than you would just straight up reading it with no analysis involved. There's 4 different methods: psychoanalytical, feminist, Marxist, and post-colonial historical. So the first one that we talk about is psychoanalytical. It focuses on the unconscious desires, internal conflicts, and early childhood experiences. Sigmund Freud, he came up with this. And when you are using the psychoanalytical lens, ask what's hidden motivations? What's motivating the character that may be below the surface of what we're seeing on the page? What are the character's fears or unresolved conflicts that explain what's happening on the surface? Rarely does a character's surface actions mirror what is below it. And why do characters do what they do? These are all important when you're talking about psychoanalytical analysis. The core idea is the unconscious mind. The lens proposes memories and desires influence emotional behaviors and states. Just like what you've done in the past influences what you're doing in the future or what you're doing in the present. And what you're doing now will influence what you do in the future, the same way with characters on the written page. And psychoanalytical lens treats these hidden forces as the real explanation behind the surface level behavior. There's 3 parts of this: the id, the superego, and the ego. Not to get too deep into the weeds of this, but the id is instinctual, pleasure-seeking part that wants immediate gratification. You go to Starbucks, you want a coffee, that's the id. Superego internalizes voice of rules, morality, and social expectations. And then the ego sits between the two and constantly negotiates between the raw desires and the demands of the outside world. You may want that coffee and you may want it free, but you can't have it free. You've got to pay for it. So the ego is negotiating between your raw desire and your demands from the outside world. When you're analyzing it using psychoanalytical analysis, ask which force, the id, the ego, or the superego, is winning your character and at what cost. What motivates your character subconsciously? Feminist analytical theory looks at how women, and now increasingly minorities, are treated in comparison to their male or majority counterparts. It focuses on the oppression of women and minority groups, and feminists in this instance doesn't limit itself to women or females. We've gone into the LGBTQ plus period and marginalized communities, whatever those may be. So when you're reading a story that you are looking at it from the feminist lens, you want to look at how are women treated in this story? How do the males keep the females from succeeding or achieving? And are there stereotypes at work? Marxist, based on the economic and cultural theories of Karl Marx from back in the 1860s, 1870s. I think that's when he came up with his theories. And it looks at the rules and class structures in a society, focusing on the haves versus the have-nots. So when you're reading this, when you're reading a story and you want to look at it from a Marxist point of view, ask who has the money and who doesn't. Who has the power and who doesn't? What role does money, power, and class play in a story? And what happens because of the differences in class, money, and power? These are the issues. Money, power, class. How do they interact? How do they propel the story forward? How do these items move the antagonist, the protagonist, the foils, whatever other characters that are in the story? How does that move them forward? How does it hold them back? Post-colonial is the last one that we're going to talk about, and it looks at the influence of time period on the writing. It's not the same as a historical novel. It's the time period that the author was writing their work. And it focuses on conquered versus the conqueror. How are other cultures viewed in relation to Western dominance? When you're reading something and you want to look at it from the post-colonial historical aspect, ask the following questions. When was this written? You may have a story written about the age of sailing ships, big, tall, masted ships. Stories written in the 1800s are going to be different than stories written in the 1980s. So ask yourself, when was it written? How does the author's setting influence the story? Who wins and who loses? And how is the West portrayed in relationship to other cultures? The West being American and European predominantly. Besides the different types of analysis, whether it be feminist, psychoanalytical, Marxist, or post-colonial, you need to understand the archetype of the story, the archetype character of this story. And it's not one of the four previous lenses, but it's found in all types of literature. And you're looking at recurring characters and images, symbols in the writing. There are certain symbols and there are certain characters that come to represent specific ideas over time. And once you understand these archetypal characters, you'll get more out of your story than prior to. So there's certain characters that you'll encounter, and you need to ask these questions when you're reading. One is, what characters have I encountered in other readings? The epic hero, the villain, the orphan, the helpless woman, the mentor, the evildoer, the teen finding his or her own way. These are all archetypal characters. And what images have I encountered before that may bring more meaning to the story? White, black, light, dark, water, fire, numbers. So going into the epic hero, the villain, the orphan. The epic hero could be like Luke Skywalker in the Star Wars trilogy. It could be Harry Potter in the Harry Potter books. Obviously, in today's world with the Odyssey coming out this summer, Odysseus is an epic hero. But on the other side of the coin, you have the villain. All right? Who are some of the villains in the movies and books that we've read? For instance, Darth Vader in the Star Wars trilogy, Lord Voldemort in Harry Potter. It could be Odysseus. Who are the villains in that one? You have orphan stories. Again, this is going back to Harry Potter. His mom and dad were killed. Spoiler alert. He's an orphan. This is classic orphan story. A helpless woman, a damsel in distress. The mentor. We'll discuss later on in the semester about the hero's journey, and every hero has a mentor, whether it's Dumbledore in Harry Potter, it could be Yoda or Ben Kenobi in Star Wars, but you got to have a mentor, an evildoer who is doing the evil. And you could also have a teen finding his or her own way. This could be like the Hunger Games trilogy. That's a teen finding his or her own way, doing the hero's journey. But when you're reading stories, think about how you want to analyze it using the 4 that we talked about, and also point out the archetypal characters in here. Who's your antagonist? That's the main person that's coming through the story. Who's the protagonist? They're used to hold the character back. Who's a foil? Foils are used to highlight a character trait of your antagonist. And the hero's journey, again, that we'll talk about later on in a future video.